Look at this. This is a vegan schnitzel. What follows is 30 minutes of me virtue signaling. We all know there's plenty of reasons not to eat meat, right? It's better for the environment, better for your health, and geez, it's better for the animal's health as well, I guess. But that's not enough for most people, because eating meat has a lot of pros going for it as well. It tastes good. That's it. That's the only one. That's the problem, right? Meat is just too delicious. And when you're used to eating as much as you want without a second thought, it's almost impossible to police yourself at every meal. So in recent years, more and more of my friends turned vegan or vegetarian, and I tried several times to do it too, with varying degrees of success. Meanwhile, one of my best friends was having an even harder time with the whole subject. I don't want to use his real name, so I will call him Mark. Now, Mark was a stubborn guy. He wasn't easily swayed by these hip trends, veganism, climate activism, TikTok. Mark just wanted life to be simple and stable. But now it seemed like everyone around him had stopped eating meat, and every time we went out to grab a bite, when everybody but him ordered salads and veggie burgers, he felt like he was surrounded by virtue signaling eco-warriors. Right? He felt like he needed to defend himself. He was sure there was a strong case to be made in favor of eating meat. Mankind has been carnivorous for millennia. Why should we suddenly stop? So he asked me to help him research the issue, and I was glad to help him because, like I said, I was never completely successful in my attempts to drop meat from my diet, and I guess I was hoping there was some way to justify eating that sweet, delicious, charbroiled corpse flesh. Also, think of the gains. Like, how am I gonna get swole if I don't eat like 2 chickens every morning before I go to the gym, right? So Mark and I went to work. Our mission? To find a morally justifiable way to eat meat. It became pretty obvious pretty quickly that most meat consumption is not justifiable. Anything produced in any sort of mass factory farming situation seems to be pretty awful for the health of person, product, and planet. But there were so many alternatives. Local restaurants with local pigs, where like every animal you eat has a name, and you can like read their entire biography and make sure they were happy every single day of their life or whatever, which is like, how exactly are you gonna keep an animal happy? Just by feeding it and giving it friends to play with? Because I can say from personal experience that food and video games is not enough to keep you from sinking into a deep existential depression. It got to the point where Mark and I were eating at these local restaurants every day because, well, Mark didn't want to change his meat consumption, and I was there to support him. And also, the meals were really delicious. But they were also expensive. So expensive. This was not a viable long-term solution unless we, actually made the effort to find jobs and support ourselves like adults do. But, I mean, what did you expect? We were millennials, right? It was 2012. We were millennials. One day, eating at one of these restaurants, we decided to speak with the chef. He didn't come out, but his son came out. It was like this family-owned business. And this kid, he had a weird look about him. Like, I made that joke earlier about getting swole by eating meat, but this kid was on another level. He wasn't huge the way that a bodybuilder is, but you could kind of see the fabric of his shirt straining against his arms when he moved. He was maybe 18, but he had this air about him. Kind of a Highlander vibe. Like, he had definitely killed before. Like, he had definitely absorbed another creature's life force. It was surreal. So Mark tells this kid, we've been coming here for a few weeks now, and we were wondering how you do it. The kid says, what do you mean? And I tell him, well, we're trying to be more conscious in the way that we eat meat, and it seems like it's really hard these days to justify eating meat in light of climate change and health concerns and the animals and all that. The kid says, well, I mean, if you just eat like local meats and like once a week, then that's already a big step towards helping the environment and your health. And yeah, I know, Mark says, but I'm not trying to change my eating behavior. I'm just trying to justify it. And the guy sort of looks back and forth as if he's like worried about eavesdroppers. In that case, I have a card for you. And he gives us this business card. I still have it, actually. Right here, see? This kid gives us this card, and he's like, we don't give these out to everyone, but since you've been coming here regularly or whatever. So finally, we'd found it, right? Concerned carnists. That's like exactly what we were at this point. Apparently, this was a club of people just like us who didn't want to give up eating meat and were looking for a justifiable solution. So that evening, we called the number on this card and had the most surreal phone conversation. Went something like this. Hello?
Ja?
Is this...
Ja, who is there?
This is Sam and Mark. We were wondering if...
Who?
Sam and Mark?
Okay, you want the seminar.
What seminar?
It's 1500 unless you want obligations, and you can do full service unless you also understand, yes?
I'm sorry, we got your card from a guy at a restaurant. We were wondering if we could
No.
visit your establishment.
No restaurant. We have no restaurant. There is no restaurant. You can just understand? Goodbye.
Click. We tried to call a few more times, but they didn't pick up. So that weekend, we bought train tickets and headed out to the address on the card. We took a taxi for the last half hour and ended up in like this country estate way out in the countryside. Looked like it was built in the 19th century. It was like a Frankenstein together from the corpses of a bunch of other houses. That's what it looked like, basically. Very strange, but it explained the bad reception, at least. We walked around for a while, found a door that possibly could have been the main entrance, knocked on it, and it just sort of swung open. It wasn't even closed. So we tentatively stepped inside. It was all wood and carpets, mismatched chandeliers, but extremely clean and orderly. Bowls of potpourri everywhere. The air was like heavy with this sweetness. We stood in the foyer for a while, sort of uncertain if we should go any deeper. Then suddenly there was a man in one of the doorways, kind of plump with a mustache. He stared at us like we were some kind of foreign object. I guess we were. Mark said, "Hi. Good afternoon." I could tell from his accent that he was the guy from the phone, but I decided not to mention that. Instead, I said, "We got your card from another member of your club." Mark showed him the business card, and the guy suddenly smiled a big, glistening white smile and said, "Good. Come along." We followed him quietly through these architecturally disjointed rooms, down a staircase. I know it seems stupid in retrospect, but I guess we genuinely didn't feel threatened by the situation as we descended into this dark cellar with this strange man. Suddenly we were in a dining room, and there were about 6 or 7 people all around a table stacked with dirty dishes, as if they had just eaten like a huge feast. And among them was the kid from the restaurant who came up to us all like bro-like, "Oh man, you guys made it!" And he like hugged us, and actually he hugged me for a little too long. It was kind of uncomfortable. He introduced himself as Nick, and Nick insisted that we sit down. They would bring out a little snack for us. So we sat there staring, smelling all kinds of delicious aromas from the other room. They had one of those like kitchen wall openings through which they could like pass plates and stuff. So they cleared the table in front of us and brought out these amazing platters of all kinds of ham, roasts, bacon, steak, birds stuffed with even smaller birds, red and white wine to go with red and white meats. Every item had some sort of elaborate name that I can't remember for the life of me, but I'll remember the taste until the day I die. I don't know, it's indescribable. You wouldn't think your taste buds were capable of such electricity. At first it was just salty, like almost painfully salty, but then it resolved into this incredible sweetness, a little like blood, but like I said, it's indescribable. Actually, I wasn't sure I should make this video because I didn't want to remind myself. But yeah, there's a good reason why I never went back. So I remember we sat there for what felt like hours, just gorging ourselves. The others sat around us, watched us, talking among themselves. They were mostly older folks. When we were done, everybody helped clear the table, insisting that we sit and digest while they work. An older woman sat down across from us, slim, wearing a dark red turtleneck. I learned later that this was the club's chairwoman. Unfortunately, I never learned her name. Although, actually, maybe that's fortunate. "So," she said, "evidently you are great enthusiasts of the carnivorous lifestyle." Mark said, "Yeah," and I said, "After tonight, definitely." The chairwoman smiled. A couple of gold teeth, actually, glimmered in her wide mouth. She had that same air, that same energy about her that I had noticed on Nick back in the restaurant, but exponentially more powerful. It was like looking at an open flame. There's no other way to put it. "Well, tonight was only a small taste of the culinary luxuries we enjoy here at the club." And she explained the rules of the club to us. It was all pretty straightforward. You paid a yearly fee, not too high, and in return you could participate in all kinds of workshops and stuff, which apparently consisted mostly of preparing and eating different types of meat. "Okay," Mark said, "but what about this meat? I mean, obviously it's delicious, but where does it come from?" And I added, "Yeah, we're mostly here because we're looking for a morally justifiable way to eat meat. You know, because of the environment and the health issues." And "There are no animals involved in this process." "Wait, so this is like lab-grown meat?" "That would be a very simplified way to see it, but yes. We have a strict carbon emissions budget of 0, and the meat is produced in ways that make it much safer for consumption. Even the processed forms we make, such as the sausages, could be considered as healthy as fried eggplant." "How's that possible?" "That's what you will learn at the seminars. If you'll stay the night, we can give you both the introductory workshop tomorrow." We stayed the night. It wasn't even a question. We were so intoxicated by the idea of limitless delicious meats, and morally justifiable meats at that. So we registered for this club. We took a cab over to the next town so we could pick up some cash and pay this fee for the introductory workshop and for the first year, which together was 1,500 euros. And then we slept in one of these mismatched rooms in a double bed. I had never slept so well in my life. I had this warmth inside me. When we got up, they had rolled a little cart into our room with these, like, uniforms. They were like cargo vests, I don't know, made from thick leather, but like super light, and they fit perfectly to our bodies. Weird. The cart also held 2 glasses of water, each with a little black pill next to it, and a note that said something like, "Drink this is your breakfast, it will give you all the energy you need." I popped it immediately. I don't know, I didn't think anything of it. Mark sort of hesitated, but I guess he felt like it was part of the whole thing and we were in it now, so down the hatch. They took us out to the woods a little ways behind the estate. Actually, maybe it was still part of the estate. I don't know, it doesn't matter. Anyway, we stood there in our weird leather vests, and they gave us some supplies. A thick rolled up blanket, a bottle of water, a flashlight, and a knife. The chairwoman told us that the first lesson any true carnivore needs to learn is what it takes to be a carnivore. So we would go out into these woods for a day, or if needed, several days, and come back once we've hunted and killed an animal. Each of us would have to bring back one kill, and then we would use that to prepare our first meals as official club members. I don't know, it made a lot of sense to me. We were ultimately going to be eating lab-grown meat, so there was no real harm in one last animal dying. And anyway, I felt like if I was going to be a carnivore, it was only right that I proved I had the guts to actually hunt and kill a living creature for sustenance, just at one time. So, we headed out. We walked through the woods for a few hours, talking, having a good time. I started to feel a little hungry, and I thought, boy, I guess that breakfast pill wasn't such a calorie bomb after all. But yeah, we just sort of hiked, thinking we would probably come across some rabbit or something somewhere. I don't know, we were city kids, we didn't know what we were doing. Eventually we thought we should probably be quiet, start stalking some prey. All we had was the knife, so we were gonna have to get up close and personal. So we split up, stealthed our way through this forest. It occurred to me that this little woods was bigger than I thought. I lost track of time a little bit, sat around in the brush for ages, just waiting for my prey to cock its head. At some point, the hunger hit me all at once. I was squatting in some bush, and the ache of it started burning a hole in my stomach. I imagined a little bunny, or a deer, or a fat wild hog just traipsing out into the clearing in front of me, and the hole in my stomach grew and groaned. Some unsuspecting animal would nuzzle the grass, and I would jump out and sink my knife into its neck, and it would twitch underneath me as its lifeblood pulsed out onto the forest floor, sticking my hands, and I would lick the blood off, and I would dig in right there and then. Fuck bringing it back to cook it. Fuck the club and its fucking rules. I was gonna eat my kill raw, the way that meat was meant to be eaten. I blinked and tore myself out of that train of thought. I wondered for a second what had come over me. This hunger wasn't me. It wasn't something I had ever felt before. But it blazed inside me, and it took all the concentration I had just to keep a hold of my own thoughts. I stood up and looked around. It had been hours, and there was no animal in sight. And then something rammed me from behind, drove me face first into the ground. I screamed and kicked out. I struggled to get onto my back. It was Mark. His left arm was on my throat. His right hand held the knife, which I held barely away from my face with one hand, trembling with the strain. He breathed spit onto my face. His eyes seemed glazed over with rage. Somehow, I rolled over on top of him, jammed my knee into his abdomen. I drew my own knife and jammed it forward, but he caught my arm, and it only sort of grazed his cheek. Something inside me screamed at me to jab at him again, to drive that knife up into the soft part under his chin and pin his tongue against the roof of his mouth. But I silenced that voice. It took all the strength I had. Mark clawed at me, scratched at my face. I felt an urge to bite his hand, but I forced myself not to. Instead, I struggled free. I stumbled to my feet. I slipped between the trees, and I ran like hell. I ran for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I just dropped into the brush, wheezing. I tried to quiet my breathing, pricked my ears to listen for Mark pursuing me, but I didn't hear anything. And I realized I really didn't hear anything. Like, you would think that our fight would have scared up some birds or something, but no, it was dead quiet in this forest. At that moment, I felt that hunger surge again inside me, and I had to fight it down, and I thought, those clever bitches back at the club. There were never any animals out here, were there? There was just the two of us and the hunger. But I wasn't going to play their game. I focused my mind as best as I could. I picked a direction and I ran. I let all that hungry rage flow into my legs and I pelted through the brush. After what felt like ages, I finally saw the forest edge, just a couple 100 meters away, and just then I heard a rustling behind me. I didn't dare look back, but I knew it was Mark. He picked up my scent, I guess. I was almost out of there, but Mark was faster than me. He tackled me again, threw me against a tree. I twisted away from his knife and he jammed it into the tree trunk, giving me enough time to haul back and kick him in the balls. He stiffened. Not like that, but for a second, he looked at me differently, as though the pain of a kick in the balls cleared his mind for a moment. Then his legs went rubbery and he crumpled to the ground. I didn't stick around to see if he would recover. I burst out the trees and out onto the field behind the clubhouse. My legs stopped obeying me at this point. They just gave way and I collapsed into the grass. The heavy-set man who had talked to us on the phone was sitting on the veranda, smoking a pipe, and watched me lie there. And slowly he just got up and padded over, pulled me to my feet. I spun around toward the woods and saw Mark limping out of the trees. He didn't look hungry anymore, he just looked confused. They brought us back inside, made us each take a cold shower. The hunger wore off slowly at first, but the cold water really washed it off. That night we sat in the dining hall with the chairwoman and a few other members who gave us a prideful little speech. She was like, "You've proven that you are stronger than the hunger, and you should never forget that," or some shit like that. And I get the point that they were making, but I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that my best friend had just tried to kill me. He probably wanted to eat me. And then they unveiled their secret. They took us through the kitchen, the cleanest kitchen I've ever seen, by the way, and down another staircase into this deep, old, vaulted cellar, like a wine cellar, and there were racks full of bottles all around, but I'm not sure that was all wine. They brought us into this chamber. It was illuminated in red lamps, which honestly I thought was a little much. There were these tanks all around, like vats of liquid. I couldn't see inside them, it was too dark, but there was definitely something floating in there. They walked us down a row of these things, there must have been a couple dozen, and at the end were 2 open tanks. They sat there, just waiting for us. The gooey liquid inside, roiling, steaming a little. There was a faint smell of sulfur. All I could think was, please don't make us get into these tanks. The chairwoman stepped in front of us and said, "Take off your shoes." Nervously, we took off our shoes. "Socks, too." The socks came off. The stone floor was cold and damp. The chairwoman slipped one foot out of its shoe and showed it to us. Her pinky toe was missing. There was a smooth, pink gap where it had once been, like a missing tooth. "Did you know humans do not need their pinky toe to keep balance?" Mark stared sullenly at the bubbling goo. I said, okay. The chairwoman said, "We will require a piece of each of you as a basis for the process. I assure you it is completely safe, and no one has ever complained about the missing toe." I stood there, paralyzed. I had no idea what to do, whether to keep going or to just run. But Mark had no hesitation. He stepped forward, placed his foot on a little stool that they provided for him. Some old guy came forward, held his foot down with one hand, and used this weird little tool, sort of like a nail clipper or a hole puncher, to just snip off his little toe. Mark didn't even flinch. They put a bandage on the stump, pulled it tight, then the old guy took the toe out of his little mechanism, walked over to one of the vats, dropped it into the bubbling goo, and closed the lid. For a moment, nothing happened. The toe just slowly sank into the goo. Then the liquid started turning red. The roiling intensified, and it looked like some sort of bubble was blowing up out of the end of the toe. I watched in horror as this tumor bulged forth out of it, and more flesh grew rapidly out in new directions, branching out within seconds to form some sort of twisted meat bonsai floating there. As it rotated, I realized it had a vaguely humanoid shape, sort of like a voodoo doll, but it had different textures all over. There was like a marbled steak texture and like a white chicken meat piece and even like a salmon fillet on one part. The chairwoman spoke to me, asked me to step forward, but I was just staring at this thing in the vat. Cold sweat glued my shirt to my back. I looked at Mark, whose eyes were completely dead, and as I looked at this thing in the vat again, it was all I could do not to scream. I don't know if I was imagining it, but for a second there, I thought I saw a face, or the fetal beginnings of one. Mark's face. I stumbled backward. Everybody stared at me. "Are you all right?" the chairwoman said. "Yeah. I just... And then I ran again. I just bolted. I think I actually caught them off guard because I was past most of them before the last of the group tried to stop me. I clawed blindly at this guy's face and just barreled him over. I pelted up the stairs, burst through the kitchen, ran over a few more folks on the way, and peeled off barefoot out the front door and down the gravel driveway. Man, that must have been the most athletic day of my life. I probably burned off all the calories I had eaten the night before. By the time that I reached a paved road, my feet were bleeding. The blood glued my soles painfully to the hot asphalt, so I had to walk in the grass, and I just followed this rural road, hoping that a car would pick me up, maybe. I had a phone on me, but no reception, so I just kept walking and walking and walking. Eventually I got one bar, just enough to call a cab. I let them take me and my bloody feet to the next town. I bought some shoes at a dollar store. Least comfortable pair I've ever owned, but that day they were just perfect. I rode the train all through the night, back home, alone, without Mark. I felt bad leaving him behind, but I had this feeling he had made his choice. Like, he had left part of himself in that place forever. I didn't know whether he would ever return. I could only hope. I got home. I told nobody what had happened over the weekend. Just locked myself in my room and stared at the ceiling for a while. Played some video games, did some stuff for uni. Life went on. But I had taken some damage. I was a husk of myself. I had retreated into the most distant recesses of my mind and just sort of ran on autopilot for a while. I tried to put meat out of my mind. I probably ate it from time to time, but honestly, I can't remember what I ate in those weeks. It's all a blur. And nothing really tasted like anything for a while. At some point, I got an email. The monthly newsletter of the Concerned Carnists Club. I used the link in that email to rescind my membership, but I kept wondering if they wouldn't try to come and track me down. But apparently, they weren't mad at me for leaving. I mean, what was I gonna do? Tell everyone this story? Nobody would believe me anyway, right? Then one day, my phone rang. It was Mark. He, barely said anything. It was just his shaking voice asking me to come over. He needed help. They kicked me out of the club, he said. I wasn't strong enough. The hunger was stronger. I paced back and forth in my room for half an hour, trying to decide, was I really going to go see my old friend who, last time I'd seen him, had tried to fucking kill and eat me? But yeah, of course I was. So I used WhatsApp to broadcast my live location to 7 of my friends, and then I rode my bike over to Mark's apartment. I rang the doorbell, waited for 10, 15 minutes, texting him, calling him. I didn't want to go inside. I'd rather meet him on the street, but he wouldn't answer. At some point, the door opened. This old lady came out. She lived in the apartment underneath him. I'd known her for years. It was a surreal moment because I had to do a little bit of small talk with her, all while pretending I wasn't fearing for my life right now. But then she held open the door, and I couldn't not go in. So I climbed the stairs to Mark's apartment. I found the little key hidden behind the potted plant and unlocked the door. I stepped inside. It was totally quiet. I called out, "Mark?" And I heard him moan softly from the back of his apartment, his living room. The furniture was covered in smears of blood. Mark lay sprawled on the red-soaked carpet. His breaths were shallow, his eyes stared blankly. I knelt next to him, turned him over, I said, "Mark, buddy, I'm here. What's going on? Are you..." And then I saw it. The bite marks. The chunks of flesh missing from his arms, his legs, his torso. The hunger had truly been stronger than him. He hadn't wanted to attack anyone else, so he had locked himself inside with the hunger. He didn't speak. He was too weak for that at this point. He just stared up at me. My best buddy. My childhood friend. And died. And at that point, I just thought, man, if this is the kind of effort it takes to eat meat, I'm just going to stop eating meat altogether. And I've been vegan ever since.